The information discussed on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered investment, legal, or tax advice. Opinions expressed are those of the participants and may not reflect the views of Laguna Capital Management. Any securities, investments, or strategies mentioned are not recommendations to buy or sell. Investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal. Listeners should consult their financial professional before making any investment decisions. Laguna Capital Management is a registered investment advisor. Services are only offered in states where Laguna Capital Management is properly licensed or exempt from licensure.
On today's episode, we're taking a look into an organization that impacts the lives of over 64 million people in 120 different countries. If you've never been to one of their branches, you almost certainly know someone who has. In recent years, they've become known simply by one letter. Join us as we talk about the YMCA with Regional CEO Margo Bryne.
Behind every thriving community are the leaders who make it happen. Join us as we meet the local influencers and visionaries shaping our community. This is Leaders with Laguna, with your host Jonathan Keith and Joshua Keith of Laguna Capital Management.
Welcome everyone to Leaders with Laguna. My name is Joshua Keith and I'm joined by my brother and fellow financial advisor, Jonathan Keith. Our firm, Laguna Capital, is excited to begin introducing you to and highlighting different leaders in our community. We want to dive into their backgrounds, their work, and maybe touch on a couple of financial topics along the way. As this podcast's first guest, we are beyond thrilled to have with us today Margo Bryne, the CEO of the Channel Islands YMCA. Margo has led the Y with amazing success, overseeing 7-branch organization, nearly 1,200 employees, and over 15,000 members. And I must say it has personally been a privilege and a pleasure serving with Margo within the YMCA and just witnessing her heart for employees, for members, and just the broader community. So with that, Margo, welcome to Leaders with Laguna.
Well, thank you for that generous introduction, but the pleasure is absolutely all mine. So thank you for the invite.
I thought we might start sort of discussing the Ventura Family YMCA in 2000. What sort of led you to the Y? And then when you took on the role of aquatics director, did you have any idea, any sense at that time as to sort of what might be in front of you with your YMCA journey?
Well, no, that's the quick answer to I had no idea about the Y journey. So just quickly, right, I had a career before coming to the Y that was really in higher education. So I was teaching at a university, and then we had some things in life that happened, and my father passed away, my grandmother passed away, and my husband is from California. We were living in the Midwest in a small town in Northwest Missouri, and decided that it was time to come to California. And so when I did that, I was looking for something that I could do while I was finishing up my doctorate, the classwork, and the Y popped up, and I was here in a new community, coming from a small rural community, right, where you were a part of the church, you were part of the school,
Sure.
And right, that's where you got your social
Sure.
time. You played some co-ed softball
Sure.
or whatever and I really missed that. And I had managed swimming pools when I was in high school and in college and in grad school. So I'm like, just take this little aquatics job and for a little while. And I've been here, it'll going on 26 years, but it all started with that aquatics director job. And I remember walking in and thinking, this will be fun. And it just pulled me in. The community pulled me in, the relationships with my staff. We had a really big aquatics department, and with the volunteers, I had never been a part of an organization that leaned into and leveraged the expertise and the passion and advocacy of volunteers the way that the Y did. Not really like that. I really like that part of it, and had an opportunity to grow in that Y, Josh, as you know. And within about a year and a half, 2 years, I was the executive director after having some other positions. I led that branch for many years. I was there for 13 years and had an opportunity to work on a special project with the then CEO. And after that project, he offered me an opportunity to be the COO. So I was really the first true COO for our organization and the first female COO for sure. did that for 6 years. And then he decided he was going to retire. And I was ready to work underneath him and retire underneath him. He was a wonderful CEO and mentor for me, but then had the opportunity to interview for the CEO position. And that was, I took on the role in March of 2019. So I've been doing this for a little while.
Yeah, that's great. You talked a little bit about it, but for the listeners that don't have great familiarity, could you just talk a little bit about the Y? I mean, just in terms of its mission and impact. Obviously, I've been blessed to have a firsthand view of the great work the Y does, but could you just maybe spend a couple of minutes and just sort of highlight some of the unique and special programs and just the impact that the community feels because of the work the Y does?
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to share that. One of the things that I really liked about the Y, it's best described, there are 3 areas of focus: youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. And my undergrad is in psychology. My master's is in education with an emphasis in kinesiology. So I always had this wellness side of things. I was a 4-sport athlete in high school, 2 in college. And so there's always been that desire to be a part of something that was active. I have a lot of energy, as Josh knows. And I believe that lifelong wellness and being healthy is a gift. When we lose our health, sometimes when we're younger and when we age, it really has a significant impact. And so I wanted to be a part of a place, an organization, a movement that had an impact on youth and them reaching their full potential, not just through their families, but supported the community, and then the lifelong wellness piece, as well as that sense of community. And the Y did that through those 3 areas of focus. The Y has a mission, our Y, of really putting programs into practices and experience into practices through Christian principles to people, all people. So all ages, all races, all religions, right? And our vision for our community is that everyone in our community is healthy and connected, and whatever that means to them. We know that social isolation is an epidemic in our country, and we believe that creating spaces where people feel like they can come, whether it's the senior who doesn't have any family around and they walk into the front desk and everybody knows their name, or everybody in their water exercise class, or a child that might have needs that are beyond some other children, can be in a basketball league or a cooking class and may feel like they belong, or they learn to swim. I can talk about it, and it makes me want to weep that there are children out there that don't have those experiences. So that's really what we're about, is pulling people together, giving them experiences that help them feel like they're a part of something, that they're deserving, and that they belong.
The thread through a lot of that and the program seems to me is a relational thread. Back to what you said, a minute or 2 ago, isolation is horrific. And the Y, through so many of its programs, just really elevates just the importance of being connected. Like you said, like the example of the senior who walks in the front doors and he's greeted with a smile and someone to put an arm around him. You're just the relational element. Human beings are created to be relational. Yeah. And the Y really sort of fosters that.
Yeah, we get to be that resource for people. And we are not a space-driven organization. We're a relationship organization, but we know that people need spaces to come, whether it's to have a cup of coffee, like a Starbucks, and we try to provide those experiences through proactive and preventative movement and help people be healthy while they're also having those relationships. So, we got groups of folks that have been coming to the Y. It's 26 years for me. And we have folks that were at the Ventura Y long before I was, and they go to their water exercise class, and then they go across the street to Denny's, and have coffee and a piece of pie.
Yeah, sure.
I love that. We have young mothers who, they leave the swimming class for their kids and they go for a walk together. They have play dates together. And, the gentleman in the core of the water exercise class, kind of exercising, but really chatting, chewing the fat rather than water exercising. And I just love it so much. And I have the gift of facilitating that. It's a blessing for sure.
Margo, can I ask a quick question about that? You mentioned that your Y, so the branches that you help oversee, that's a particular focus. Is it safe to say that some of that is an emphasis that you personally and your team has brought to your Ys? I mean, I would imagine a lot of that is just the universal mission of the Y. But is there some of that you guys, do you have the ability to kind of steer the focus
That's a really good question. Every Y has can define their own mission because we're a separate 501c3. So we merged with another Y. So we actually have 8 branches now. I know Josh mentioned 7, but we now have 8. So all of those YMCAs are a part of our association. So we're one 501c3 when we talk about the financial side of things. So each one of those 501c3s has their own mission. So yes, I would say that I, in particular, as the CEO, in partnership with our governing board and our branch boards, right, we set the tone. It has to start somewhere. And so I believe that starts with me. And I know our staff, we work consistently on the culture and what we want the place to be like that we work. And in turn, what does that experience feel like those people who participate as in our programs and our membership and our childcare and our swimming and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, I believe, right, it starts at the top. Never do it alone. I don't do any of this alone. You have to have a team that believes in you. And, I'm blessed to have volunteers that support that and that approach. And it's very familial and it's just really important. And I think very transparent with this is who we are.
That's great. You did mention finances, and we're, as financial planners, that's kind of an area that we obviously think a lot about, and in particular, how individuals and families think about their finances. But as it relates to the why, how do you guys go about educating donors in terms of financial support, various ways they can give? What does that look like for your organization?
To share that's a good question. To share that, I think it's important to understand the structure of our Y. And so we have a governing board over our 501c3, and then we have advisory boards at each one of our 8 branches. And the way that we tell that story is through the staff in our local communities, through our volunteers in local communities, and those folks who volunteer to help us campaign and go out and tell the story. One of the things that we learned, that we have learned, and in particular through COVID, is that it's really hard for people to grasp the expansive programs and experiences that the Y has, right? We have a crisis shelter, we have a transitional age housing program and support program, and then we have aquatics classes. So it's a lot. And so the staff can tell a story, and this is what it means to us. But when you have volunteers that go out and say, these are programs and services and support that the Y offers, and this is my story of how it affected me and how it's made a difference in my life. And I think that's where we kind of educate on that we are a charity and this is how we support our community. I think the storytelling is the biggest, and we learned that through the pandemic. And then, we also have here at our association office a leader in the development space and who helps to manage all of the data and all of that. And so they support our branch managers who are out, our branch executive directors who are out in the community. So they understand the sophistication around some things. I know we're going to get into this later maybe, but like donor advised funds are much more, there are many more of those coming our way. Donations that are through DAFs, and even smaller gifts through DAFs than what we've seen in the past. And so she helps to keep our branches and our volunteers updated on those sort of things. But when it comes to educating, I would go back to the story, whether it's through social media, whether that's through coffee dates, right? And meeting with people and telling them the story. I'm kind of old school and I drink a lot of tea, drink a lot of, a lot of things just to meet with people, to talk to them about what we do and help them understand. And then there's so many people that have their own Y stories, to let them tell us about their Y story and how do we connect them to what's meaningful to them. It doesn't matter what's meaningful to me. It's what's meaningful to a donor.
You alluded to COVID, which seems like a big separating line in a lot of ways, right, over the last 10 years. And you suggested this a bit, but can you see maybe even in the mechanism, and you mentioned social media, all these sorts of avenues, but kind of see over the last 10 years and even using COVID as kind of a dividing line, how that education process and the effectiveness of it has changed? What do you see has kind of been more effective, or what has, if there's big things that jump out in terms of
it's a good point. And COVID I don't know if COVID there was a change in the industry, but there was really a change in how we looked at our work, right? You get in this rhythm and there's this inertia of our work. You get up and you kind of do the same things. And I COVID was an opportunity for us to say, hey, we were shut down in different ways from different orders, longer than a year, 12 to 18 months. We were kind of in and out. So we had a chance to pause and say, hey, what does our community need? How are we going to fund that? Number one, as a brand new CEO, it was a little bit less than a year, and here I am, and we're shut down. Like, oh, it's going to close.
Oh, I didn't realize that timeline that you'd just become.
The first
wow. Yeah.
female CEO, and it's going to close, right? And so, so there was just a lot of thought, asking people who had been in this work longer than me, or volunteers. But we knew that this was a point in time, an inflection point that we can say, how do we want to arrive in this moment? And how do we want to focus on recovery and on the backside of this pandemic? Because that's going to end. It's just when. What does thriving look like to our organization? Yeah. And we knew that that changing the story around wellness and what it means to people, changing the story around our crisis shelter and what that means to those that we serve, changing the story around swimming lessons and it's drowning prevention. And, drowning is one of the leading causes, I think second leading cause of death of children. So that really is a life-saving work that we're doing. And so I think that we kind of shifted how we look at our work rather than this inertia that we were in. And again, that was an inflection point for us to really think about how we wanted to view ourselves and how we wanted the work that we do and how we wanted others to view that work we do. And so I think the story changed.
It's great that you mentioned wellness again there, because I guess I hadn't, until you just said it again, I hadn't connected those dots. But of course, that was such a core point of the whole COVID episode, right? Yeah, and so it's almost... That's neat that it was almost there for the taking, and the Y was already probably doing a lot of those things, but the refocusing and delivery of education in that regard, that's great. Right. That makes sense.
I think sometimes we apologize for having facilities like gym facilities because that doesn't feel nonprofit, and providing opportunities for people to prevent chronic disease, to prevent falls when we're older, to help with balance. That's really important. And so it was shifting how we looked at things, shifting who would want to fund fall prevention, shifting who would want to fund chronic disease prevention, diabetes prevention, right? And starting to connect our story in a different way, because we were just grinding, right? We worked really hard. We put our head down and tried to make a difference, and we really hadn't thought about it. And we had to think about who we were going to be on the other side of this thing.
I know you've been asked this a lot, Margo, but how do you think, or how did you sort of get through that period? Obviously, you'd been there for like 12 months or maybe like 9 months.
Yeah.
In terms of managing a broad organization, sort of that, I'm sure there was sort of financial turbulence. There obviously was just logistical turbulence. Looking back now, like what got you through, and sort of like strategically, how did you personally just sort of like work through that?
Boy, that is a question that
I know it's probably a 5-hour question, but yeah.
But thank you for asking. Well, the first is it's important to share that there was fear and there was anxiety of what would happen to the Y. At that time, I think the Y had been here for 133, 134 years. And what is going to happen to this organization? And it is on my shoulders. It was an early awakening of the weight of being a nonprofit CEO and at that time, about 1,100 employees and their well-being and all the people that we serve. So it was a weight. So I'm a woman of faith. And so there was a lot of prayer. There were some calls to my mama and a lot of conversations at the dinner table with my husband. And then I called the CEO, to be quite frank, that was here prior to me and said, seriously, didn't tell me this was going to happen. Oh, what do I do? Where do I go?
This wasn't on the job description.
It was not on the plan. And he was just very steadfast in, Margo, you're a COO. You've come out of that space and now you're the CEO. Lean into the operations. Yeah. You know what you're doing. And don't do it alone. He had told me that before, never make the hard decisions alone. You have great volunteers. And so I would say what we did was really form this operations team, right? How are we going to financially manage through this? How long is it going to last? And what are the decisions that we need to make now and in the future pulled together people who know more about complex financial matters than I do. We have some very wise volunteers. And how are we going to look at things? And then, I would say experts in HR too. When you have 1,100 employees and 850 of them don't have work to do because we're closed down, how do we, in a caring, humane way, support our staff as we have to lay off? And thank goodness there were some pretty profound unemployment benefits that helped all of them. That's what I did was, number one, think, what are the decisions that I need to make today? Because if you recall, things were changing. We were getting different data. 24 hours, we would make a decision. The next day, we're like, well, that decision is out. A good thing we didn't tell anybody because the data had changed. So what decisions do we need to make today, and what data do we have? What decisions do we need to put off because it would be wiser to hold on that and then to shape it out? But it was pretty early on that we had conversations about where we don't know how long this scenario is going to last with closure. And so we really have to look at the short term, the mid-range, and the long term. And what is the long term is how we're going to thrive on the backside of this so we can continue to support our communities. And that was the priority. So, but I leaned into people who, really cared. And I think as a CEO, I came out hard and fast that said, I am asking for kindness, and I am asking for grace, and I am making decisions that I believe are best for the people in our organizations and that the organization serves. I've never been through a pandemic, nor have you. So if you have a question about a decision that I have made or we have made, come and talk to me, because having conversations with people who can't solve the problem isn't going to help me. This is a we thing, and I'm the one that's right communicating the decisions and having to make hard decisions. And so that grace and kindness became a theme through the pandemic, as well as making decisions on the most current data that we had that will serve the people who are working in our organization and those that we serve. But it was a bear, and it took a lot of grit, I'm telling you.
Yeah. I would also think the core mission of the Y in a way is designed, not ideally, but it's so well designed for something like a health crisis, health, wellness. However, because of the nature of COVID, sort of the ability for the Y to flourish when it typically would, it just was sort of just hamstrung, because facilities and
Yeah, but one of the gifts that I have is I have some exceptional leaders out in our communities, and they're coming and saying, hey, we can't be in our facilities, but we know that we can do something outside. And guys, they are just saying, we're going to move all of our equipment outside. We're going to get some shade structures, and we're going to rock and roll. They're going to be a little bit more than 6 feet apart. If you guys remember all of those guidelines that we have, and we're going to get people back together in a way that's safe for them. And all of a sudden, we have team members all over between Ventura and Santa Barbara County and now San Luis Obispo County that said, we're going to figure this out. And they trusted each other. They shared with each other. And then all of a sudden we have people that are outside, and we see these trickling of cars coming into our parking lot and, talking with each other. How you doing? It was pretty profound. And it was in some of those moments, while the physical health was so important that people started to exercise again, the emotional, mental health of people being able to connect, because there were people isolated in their homes by themselves. And so we had some older folks that came and said, can I just sit in the lobby and talk to the staff? I just need a place to go.
Just the relational. Yeah.
So they would just go stand on treadmills for a couple hours, not do a whole lot, but it was.
And how ironic, this is just one small data point, but how ironic is it that today, like, for example, the Santa Barbara YMCA, the atrium now has outdoor equipment that because the members, that started, COVID, and now here we are 5 years later, and there's outdoor equipment. Just that's how it's gone, So
I was walking through the Santa Barbara Y. It was maybe 3 months ago, and we were talking about we needed to replace the equipment outside, and we needed to replace the cover. So it was just it was nicer. And we had a couple of members come up to us and say, please don't take it away. We love this. They thought we were coming to pull it. No, actually, we're moving nicer equipment out there for you. I would say, going through that, knock on wood, but we don't have anything that's more profound than that as an organization we have to go through in my time. It teaches you lessons in humility, that you don't always have control. It teaches you lessons that you don't always have the answers, and a community and a team, and really listening to understand and leverage the expertise of people was really important. And then, like I said, we were making decisions hard and fast, and just a lot of, my team makes fun of me, I use this word, but a lot of grit.
Yeah.
Touching back on finance for a second, and you mentioned something earlier when you mentioned donor advised funds, and that's obviously, and we come across those in our world. And so I'm curious, piggybacking off of that, what kind of trends, because I would call that part of a growing trend, right? The use of donor advised funds. What sort of trends are you seeing in the patterns of giving, in things that are getting utilized, let's say like a donor advised fund? And you can speak as broadly or specifically as you want, but we're just curious what that has looked like in its maturation to where it looks like today.
Because I would imagine that 15 years ago, this what I would call sort of strategic giving, like a donor, like that was probably minimal versus today.
Right.
Is that fair?
Cash and checks, probably, or credit cards.
Right.
You're correct, and I actually appreciate that. The millennial generation, which is a large generation, and they have kids, their families, they're leaders in our community now. And I think through some of the technology resources and the tools that they have, as well as just the education that they can find more quickly than the prior generation, right? They're learning how to use these more advanced methods, and they want an ease of use. And so with a donor advised fund, right, they get one receipt. So when it comes time to taxes, right? Yeah,
that's right. That's big.
Keep all that stuff and wait for all those year-end letters to come. So we are seeing a significant increase in donor advised funds, not necessarily larger gifts through donor advised funds, but more gifts. And so we, as an organization, we have a wonderfully sophisticated individual who we have on board, and she has helped us to learn in how we track and water, legally, how we are compliant with donor advised funds and that sort of thing. So that is one. And I would say in a broader sense, we are seeing larger donations. So we call our major gifts in our organization 1,000 and over. And so we've seen an increase in major gifts,
interesting.
which is wonderful. And definitely a desire to kind of duplicate or increase their giving through, if there's a match, that opportunity, then we see an increase in giving and things like that. So, and then I would say another piece that we're seeing is that our legacy giving, so the long-term giving and those legacy funds or endowment support, we're seeing more of that happen with intentionality. And I believe that comes from the relationships that we're developing in our branches, and people want to see the why survive long-term. And telling those stories and having an impact on people's lives is making a difference in that legacy club. And then lastly, we have individuals that want to give to the general fund and just help people and say, whatever you all believe is the most important use of these funds, please take those and use those in this fiscal year. But we also have individuals that are passionate, whether it's summer camp, whether it's our crisis shelter, whether it's our home for transitional age foster youth, that want to give specifically to something that has meaning in their life. And so that's, again, where those stories and letting people know that we have opportunities in those spaces. So really kind of that restricted giving has increased in our organization compared to the unrestricted kind of general fund.
It is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think part of it comes from maybe not national trends when it comes to the restricted versus unrestricted. I think it's come with when we're telling our stories, specific stories about, let's say, a homeless youth, and, that's going to pull at somebody's heartstrings in a way and that they may never have known. And they say, rather than the general fund, we want to restrict that to help that program. So, which is fine. We definitely want to follow what a donor wants, but I just high level, those are some of the things that we're seeing.
But it sounds like you have seen a clear divergence in the last few years that restricted is growing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
As I said here, that's interesting because you alluded to it, but I could also correlate that to as messaging and education and needs get more specific in the discussion of those needs, that's touching on different people's, like you said, heartstrings, right? And so their desire to give, not good or bad, but they hear that and they connect with that messaging that might be getting more specific and better as social media, et cetera. And so in some ways, it does make sense that the directed giving is on the rise, whereas general giving
Yeah. And like I said, I don't believe that's necessarily a national trend, but that's what we're seeing. Based on how we're trying to communicate who we are and what we do. But yeah, DAFs definitely are there, and they're here to stay. And I think it's really neat to see that DAFs aren't just those 10,000 and over anymore, right? That this next generation is seeing an opportunity there, and a little bit easier when it comes to tax season.
That's great. I'm glad you mentioned that, because again, we see donor advised funds on our side of the table, but it's neat to hear how that looks and is looking right on the nonprofit side, and the use of them is on the rise.
Right. Well, and as a nonprofit, I think, we have the resources and sophistication around that. And there are some beautiful nonprofits that are a little bit smaller that could be challenged by, some of the new mechanisms of giving and being ready for those. So I think that could be a challenge for the nonprofit world in the upcoming years.
We want to make it a practice to always end our conversations with the same question to our guest, and that is for you today. What is something that you are grateful for, either personally or professionally right now?
I don't know if I can answer that in what one thing. Honestly, Josh, there was a moment that I had plans on leaving the Y and working back in higher education. And I am really blessed that I asked people that I respect a lot and care a lot about me to help me in thinking through that decision and being given the opportunity. I worked hard to get here, and I'll continue to work hard, but being given the opportunity to sit in the seat as a CEO and inspire volunteers and staff and partner with volunteers and staff to make a difference in people's lives. That's what I'm here for. I think that's why I was put on this earth, and to get to do that every day. My husband, I can't tell you how many times he said, you're one of those people who loves their job. And it's beyond that. I don't love it. It's just who I am. It was what I was born to do. Yeah. But man, I love my family. I love my kids, love my husband and my mom, and
the Kansas City Chiefs.
I don't know when this is going to air, but we're 0-2, so hopefully 1-2. Huge football fan, so we had a couple of.
You're grateful for a lot.
I am. There's only been a few days that I got up and said, I don't know if I want to go to work, and they were both during COVID, and it was just because I was tired. It was just physically tired. Yeah. So to get up and want to come to work every day, and to get in that car and can't wait to be in my office and be with the people who also believe in what we do so much is pretty darn awesome.
Yeah, that's a great answer. This has been a delight, Margo. Thank you so much for joining John and I on this inaugural podcast. And the Y is incredibly lucky to have you leading the organization and directing all of its various efforts within the community. So I'll just point out, if listeners want to learn more about the Y programs or ways that you can support, you can visit www.ciymca.org. That's ciymca.org. Margo, bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys for the opportunity. It was a pleasure.